My wife convinced our daughter to falsely accuse me of abuse, leading to a 20-year prison sentence. A decade later, my daughter confessed the truth, overcome with guilt. Hello Reddit I+ here. 30 years ago, I was married to Sarah. Back then, I thought she was the love of my life. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood, a teenage daughter named Emily, and a seemingly normal life. But as they say, you never really know what goes on behind closed doors. The truth is, things hadn't been good between Sarah and me for a while. Like any couple, we argued about the usual things: money, parenting, day-to-day stresses. But this was different. Sarah had started to change. She became distant, cold, manipulative in ways I didn't fully grasp at the time. Looking back, I can see it now. She was laying the groundwork for what came next. One night, I came home late from work. Emily was in her room, and Sarah was waiting for me in the living room. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk," she said, her tone as icy as her stare. What followed was the most surreal conversation of my life. Sarah accused me of being abusive toward Emily. For a moment, I couldn't even process what she was saying. Me? Abusive? To my own daughter? The very idea was absurd. But Sarah wasn't joking. She claimed Emily had told her everything. I begged to speak to Emily, to clear up what had to be a massive misunderstanding. But Sarah wouldn't let me. "She's afraid of you," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. I barely slept that night, clinging to the hope that Sarah would come to her senses in the morning. But by the next day, everything unraveled. 2 police officers showed up at my door. They were calm, but firm. Emily had made a formal statement, accusing me of yelling at her, threatening her, even hitting her. My little girl, my daughter, was saying these things about me. I'll never forget the moment they brought Emily into court to testify. She looked so small, so fragile, and she couldn't even meet my eyes. Her hands trembled as she spoke, and it was painfully obvious to me that she had been coached. But the jury didn't see that. All they saw was a terrified child and a man they had already decided was guilty. The verdict came quickly. I was sentenced to 20 years in prison for crimes I didn't commit. Prison is a world all its own, and nothing can prepare you for it, especially when you know you don't belong there. At first, I was consumed with anger. I was furious at Sarah, at Emily, at the justice system that had failed me. But anger only gets you so far. Eventually, I had to figure out how to survive. I threw myself into books, spent my days working in the prison library. For a while, I turned to religion, hoping to find some kind of solace, though my faith didn't last. I made a few friends, but I made more enemies. Still, none of that compared to the pain of knowing that Emily, my own child, believed I had hurt her. That was a weight I carried every single day. 10 years into my sentence, I found myself sitting in the same dreary visitation room where I met with my lawyer every week to discuss another dead-end appeal. But this time, my visitor wasn't my lawyer. It was Emily. She was 23 by then, a grown woman, but I would have recognized her face anywhere. She sat across from me, her hands trembling, and said the words I'd been desperate to hear for over a decade. "Dad, I'm so sorry." What she told me shattered and healed me all at once. Sarah had forced her to lie. Emily had been scared. Scared of losing our home, our family, the stability she thought she had. Over the years, the guilt had consumed her until she couldn't keep the truth buried any longer. Her confession set me free. Legally, anyway. Walking out of prison after 20 years doesn't feel like freedom when the world you left behind no longer exists. By the time I got out, I was 53 years old, broke, and utterly lost. Emily wanted to rebuild our relationship, but I couldn't even look at her at first. I loved her, but the betrayal had left a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. As for Sarah, she disappeared long before Emily told the truth. She drained our bank accounts and vanished, leaving no trace behind. To this day, I have no idea where she is, and I don't want to know. It's been 7 years since I walked out of that cell. Emily and I are in touch now. We're both in therapy, working to untangle the mess that Sarah left behind. It's not easy, and some days are harder than others. But we're trying. People often ask if I've forgiven Emily. The honest answer? I don't know. I've forgiven the scared little girl she was, the one who didn't know any better. But I'm still struggling to forgive the adult who waited so long to set the record straight.